Guys, I have a hot take for you. I think the route they're taking with Pounce is probably for the best. That's for Omniraptor, and I think that's for everyone. Well, mainly Omniraptor. And I'm about to tell you why. As I'm sure you're all aware, uh, currently, Omniraptor and its Pounce suck. But I'd also like to remind you that I don't think it was all that great before this. That's right. Pounce did kind of sad, pathetic bleed. A Dillo could just run off pretty much a full pounce. Same with a Packy. And it just kind of left a lot to be desired. And then, of course, on top of this, with the new system, it makes landing pounces even harder. And with the majority of the player base being a lot small and agile, it's really easy for them to face you and for you to get bit. And, or sometimes much worse. And so I know you're thinking, how is this a better system? Let's just turn it back. But I'm here to tell you that what I'm suggesting is going to be better than even going back to the previous update, because that also sucked. What I'm talking about is another golden age for what was formerly Utah Raptor. And I don't know if you remember this, but Omniraptor had a couple of golden ages where you genuinely had to be afraid of a pack of Omniraptors. I remember there was one shortly after Update 4, or around Update 4 when they added the Oasis. And even before that, during Update 3, I think I made a video on it a while back, where I, as a Carno, had to really be worried about a pack of 4 Omniraptors. I cheesed a river. And I remember prior to that, I was fairly confident in even facing off like a full pack of Utahs. Just because I knew that the pounce wasn't that great and the bleed wasn't really going to do nothing, and then obviously the bites and then the size, and like it's not like they could really do much as long as you knew what you're doing. So how do we get from literally the worst iteration of pounce in many people's opinion, I'm sure, to another one of these scenarios? Well, you see, I say that it's going to be like the golden age, but I hope not exactly like that. At least for people that aren't playing Omniraptor's sake. I am of the opinion that Pounce isn't really that fun to play against. Especially when it's good. Because you could do whatever you can, and they just run at you. Even when you're facing them, even when you should be trading a good hit, even when it doesn't really make sense, they'll hit you from the face, teleport to your side, do some bleed, and then just jump, dismount, usually far enough away from any real form of retaliation. And that whole system just isn't that fun to fight against. However, with this current system, we could freely, I feel, buff Omni back to a state where bleed does some scary, devastating damage, some bleed damage, and be a fair bit more balanced and fair. And I think the biggest problem with this current system is that the risk to reward ratio is way off. There's so much risk involved in a pounce, and there is hardly any reward. At least in the previous update, the reward wasn't that great, but the risk for pouncing something wasn't that terrible either, so it didn't really matter. However, I feel like if we want Omniraptor to be the creature that, the Omni tier hunter, the thing that kind of hunts everything, it's definitely going to need a pretty good bleed buff. However, a pretty good bleed buff without any good way to defend yourself, especially if something like Packy or Tenno or Sarah or Carno, the things that aren't that much bigger, that would probably have a way smaller bleed pool than something like a Stego or about to get Trike and Rex, even Maya, is that they would probably suffer they would obviously suffer way worse than all the rest of these large playables, except that with a system that makes it where if you're agile and quick and are able to face the Omniraptor, you could block the pounce. This means that small creatures, such as Packy, such as Dillo, that would easily probably get one pounced and bled out pretty easy, have a decent way of defending themselves. And creatures like Tenno, Carno, and Sarah, who, while probably have a better bleed pool, it would probably, wouldn't be too much harder to bleed them out, but are still fairly agile, even, and still fairly fast, would also have a pretty half decent way to defend themselves. But the larger creatures like Stego, Rex, and Shrike, they're going to have a lot harder time, they have a huge hitbox, they're not as agile, they're not as fast, they're going to be pounced pretty easy, even with this system. We see it now with Stego. Stego is actually already having part of it's due to the stamina changes. I think that's the biggest thing. But still, even with this supposed sucky system, Stego with the stamina changes is the easiest it's been to hunt in a while, even with Pounce being at its supposed worst. The alleged hardest creature, this untouchable creature, is now one of the easier things for an Omniraptor pack to hunt, and I think that's what I think the time to kill across the board with bleed just needs to be reduced. Omni, if it got a decent pounce buff where it did like believable bleed, having like that claw just come down your side, just leaving all that open a big old gash, you should be bleeding profusely. This is probably one of the best ways if we want Omni to really be scary, especially to stuff that's large like Stegosaurus, like Trike, like Rex. We want it to be the thing that hunts everything. It's going to need a lot better bleed, and the smaller creatures are going to need a much easier way to defend themselves. And I think we're already seeing this in this system. However, it just needs some adjustments because there's just not enough reward for even pouncing something like Packy or Dillo. The bleed's not good enough in those scenarios. You still feel like a little paperweight when you should be equally terrifying, I feel like. I think everything should, be scary in its own right to fight and go against. Omniraptor just isn't that against a lot of creatures, but I think we just need a good... And this isn't even... I'd like to point out, this isn't even taking in consideration that we should get the pounce to pin. Which makes me wonder if, are we going to need a buff? I would still like a bleed buff, personally. I think it still takes too long to kill stuff as Omni. But, honestly, a lot of video games, they use the risk to reward. And I think that's the biggest problem. We need to bump up the reward. But I think we're looking at what I think could be probably the best iteration of Omniraptor, the most fun to fight against, and the most lethal we could let Omniraptor be. I'd just like to throw that out there before you go screaming to revert all the changes. We could be looking at the best, most fun Omniraptor, as long as they just make the pounce worth the risk. And then boom. I think that's really all we're missing. We could have, scary Omniraptor that hunts everything in a reasonable amount of time. No more like, you look at like a Stego fight, it's 20 minutes. Like, I know Stego's big, but 20 minutes is kind of crazy. Especially when you could be in like a herd of 5. Maybe you should start being in a herd. I don't know. You're giving all that stuff. Make it so they have to be in a herd. They have to be scared. Everyone should be scared. It's supposed to be a scary game. Okay. That is all. Bye-bye.